Pakistan thought it had found a way to corner India over the Indus Waters Treaty. After the Pahalgam terror attack, India put the 1960 treaty in abeyance. Pakistan called it an act of war. It went global. It leaned on an international court. It challenged Indian hydropower projects, and it hoped legal pressure would force Delhi back to the table. But India did something unexpected. It simply refused to play. No representatives, no submissions, no recognition of the court, and no money, which has created a bizarre situation. Pakistan is now reportedly paying not just its own legal costs, but India's share as well, simply to keep the arbitration alive. Reports suggest that the supposedly bankrupt Pakistan has already spent more than $600,000 in legal fees so far. So has Pakistan's biggest legal gamble become its most expensive diplomatic setback? Why did Islamabad choose this route? Why does India's boycott cost it almost nothing? And what does this tell us about the future of the Indus dispute? A little context first. The Indus Waters Treaty was signed in 1960. It divided the Indus River system between India and Pakistan, giving India control over the eastern rivers, and Pakistan, of course, had control over the western rivers. Now, for more than 6 decades, this treaty survived. It survived wars, it survived military crises, diplomatic breakdowns between India and Pakistan. It survived everything. It was often described as the one agreement that kept functioning even when everything else between the two neighbors collapsed. But then came the Pahalgam terror attack. In April 2025, 26 tourists were killed in Kashmir. India's response went beyond diplomatic protests or military signaling. Delhi placed the Indus Waters Treaty in abeyance, arguing that Pakistan's continued support for cross-border terror had fundamentally altered the basis of all cooperation. Now, for Pakistan, this was not just a bilateral dispute. The Indus system supports most of its agriculture, millions of livelihoods, and a significant part of its economy, which is why Islamabad treated the move as an existential challenge. So Pakistan's answer was legal escalation. It turned to a court of arbitration operating under the Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague. The mechanism had originally been activated years earlier over India's Kishenganga and Ratle hydropower projects. Islamabad believed this was its strongest card. Internationalize the dispute, get a neutral forum involved, secure rulings against India, and create enough pressure to force Delhi back into negotiations. On paper, that strategy looked wonderful, but India had already made up its mind. Delhi said it will not or does not recognize the Court of Arbitration's jurisdiction in the matter. It rejected the process, questioned its legitimacy, and simply refused to participate. No Indian representatives appeared, no project data was submitted, and every ruling issued by the tribunal was dismissed by India as having no legal standing whatsoever.
India has never accepted the legality, legitimacy, or competence of the so-called Court of Arbitration. Its pronouncements are therefore without jurisdiction, devoid of legal standing, and have no bearing on India's rights of utilization of waters. India also categorically rejects Pakistan's selective and misleading references to the so-called award. As reiterated in a press release of 27 June 2025, the Indus Waters Treaty stands in abeyance by a sovereign decision of the Government of India, taking in response to Pakistan's continued sponsorship of cross-border terrorism.
So this was not just a political message, it had a financial consequence too. Because arbitration is expensive. There are arbitrator fees, administrative costs, registry charges, legal expenses. Normally both sides share the burden, but India refused to pay. And if one side walks away while the other wants the proceedings to continue, somebody still has to keep the lights on. And that somebody in this case turned to be Pakistan. Reports indicate that Islamabad is now covering the costs needed to keep the arbitration process moving, including expenses that would ordinarily have been shared. The reported bill has already crossed $600,000 and continues to climb. And that's where the story becomes very awkward for Pakistan. Pakistan launched this legal battle hoping to increase pressure on India. Instead, it has ended up carrying all the financial burden largely on its own. Now, for a country that has repeatedly relied on IMF support and external financial assistance, funding a prolonged international arbitration is hardly insignificant. More importantly, the money is not delivering the outcome that Islamabad wanted. The treaty remains in abeyance. India refuses to recognize that process, and every additional hearing adds another cost without bringing Delhi any closer to changing its position. Pakistan had hoped that arbitration would create leverage. Instead, what it has created for Pakistan is a growing bill. The dispute over the Indus Waters Treaty is far from over. Pakistan will continue arguing its case. India will continue defending its position from outside the arbitration framework. But this episode has exposed an uncomfortable reality for Islamabad. International legal mechanisms work best when both sides accept the authority of the process. India no longer does. And that leaves Pakistan in a strange position, funding an arbitration whose outcome India already has said that it will not recognize. So Pakistan wanted to internationalize the dispute. Instead, it is now finding itself paying to keep that international process alive, while India is simply watching from the sidelines. This is Times Access, where global stories meet India's perspective. Click on the bell icon to subscribe because the next big global shift will have India at its center.